Ever since Apple announced the switch to their own custom Apple Silicon chips for the Mac lineup, Intel has been under a ton of pressure from their investors to step up their game, especially after Apple released the M1 Max, which have been blowing everyone away. So just yesterday, Intel announced their weapon to fight back and hold onto their market share, and that is, of course, Alder Lake, which is their next generation of chips that are actually hybrids, meaning that they'll have both big cores and little cores, which is what Apple has been doing for years with all of their chips. And it's actually what's helped the new M1 Mac get industry-leading performance and battery life at the same time. Now, Intel was already using this hybrid tech with their Lakefield chips, but those were heavily focused on battery life, only having one big core with 4 efficiency cores. Alder Lake is going to be a totally different beast. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly how Alder Lake will work, when we can expect it to get released, how it'll compete with Apple's chips, and I'm even going to look at some leaked Alder Lake benchmarks to see if Intel can finally make a comeback. Now, the very first thing I want to mention is that when Apple completes their transition to their own chips, they will never again use Intel, ever. That ship has sailed. And within the next few months, Apple is going to release some new M1X powered Macs, and the performance is going to be mind-blowing, so keep in mind that Intel's Alder Lake will be competing with at least the M1X, not the current M1 chip. Intel says that Alder Lake will be here in the second half of 2021, but based on their past, there's a good chance that it's going to get delayed. Just checking out the Mac Rumors forums, there are multiple users who doubt that Intel will have them ready this year, with one user claiming that rumors are already pointing to a 2022 release date. But enough with all of that, let's dig into how Alder Lake actually works. First off, the most interesting detail is that it'll use the 10nm architecture, not the 7nm like many people were hoping for, so that's a bit disappointing since AMD has already been making 7nm chips for an entire year already. Now, if you're wondering how the whole big little chip design will work, there apparently was a leak showing 12 different possible configurations to the S series of Alder Lake chips, with the highest one having 8 big cores, 8 little cores, and 1 GPU core. And interestingly, there were also some configurations with no little cores at all, so I suspect that those are actually for desktop systems that don't rely on battery power like laptops do, so they don't need any little cores, which are meant to be efficient. So the models with the little cores are only meant for the laptop and mobile segment, so they can save battery life, which is one of the most important factors in a great laptop. And that's exactly what we saw with Apple's M1 MacBook Pro, with up to 20 hours of battery life, which is incredible. In fact, Apple just published a support article showing the difference in power consumption and thermal output between the M1 Mac Mini and the high-end Intel Mac Mini. The Intel model basically consumes 3 times more power while at idle and while maxed out, and it puts out less than 3 times the amount of heat with only a maximum of 133 BTUs per hour. That means a Mac server farm can get 3 M1 powered Mac Minis for the same power and thermal price of one Intel Mac Mini, which means that they can save a significant amount of money on electricity and their cooling system. But wait, it gets even crazier. The M1 Mac Mini is actually 8% faster than the highest end Intel Mac Mini in terms of the Cinebench R23 stress test. And then if you look at graphics performance, it's over 4 times faster. So this is a no-brainer for servers, showing that Intel is in a lot of trouble in the server space as well, especially when Apple releases the M1X Mac Mini. And this whole efficiency difference is extremely important for laptops, and that's why Apple's MacBooks can run at full performance while on just battery power alone, while many Windows laptops slow down drastically in order to save battery life. Now, Alder Lake is meant to fix that problem, so let's see what Intel has up their sleeves in terms of performance. The best chip will feature 16 cores, 8 big and 8 small, and it looks like we already have some leaked benchmarks from an early engineering sample. This new chip scored 996 points in terms of single core and 6931 points in multi-core, which obviously isn't great for a 16-core chip, but it seems like all of the cores were only running at 1.38 gigahertz for this engineering sample at least. The big cores will likely run much faster, potentially over 4.8 gigahertz, so we can expect a multi-core score of well over 10,000, which is actually really impressive. But keep in mind that this is the top of the line Alder Lake chip. But what makes it very interesting is that ADATA has been confirmed to be the manufacturer of the RAM models for Alder Lake chips, with up to 64 gigs of RAM per stick and up to a massive 8400 megahertz speed, which is absolutely insane. Videocards.com leaked a photo of the very first Alder Lake S CPU, which has a new rectangular shape using the brand new LGA 1700 socket. So it shows that Apple needs a larger socket to fit all of that in it. Getting even deeper, Intel's long-term vision is to stick the memory into the chip package itself, which is exactly what Apple is currently doing with their custom chips like the M1 using the unified architecture. This could help make Alder Lake very competitive, especially if it supports PCI Express 5.0, which has been rumored for some time. This all seems to make a lot of sense for Intel, and they're even looking to scale these hybrid chips across their entire lineup in the future, so they seem to be going all in on this new technology. However, there's a massive hurdle that Intel is gonna have to get over, one that Apple has already solved, and that's software support. While the concept of having both big and little cores sounds great, the software has to be able to properly utilize the cores to make them all fire up during high-performance tasks, or for simple tasks, only having the efficiency cores running. Windows will have to know how to properly handle this, as well as the app that you're running. AMD actually came out and said that this big little core design doesn't really make sense until software catches up, because everything from the scheduler, the memory allocator, and the memory subsystem need to be in tune with the software. So there's a chance that Intel could be jumping the gun a little bit, unless they're secretly in talks with Windows to get software support up and ready. But in my opinion, I think this is Intel's only chance to get back into the game. And they did mention that they'll be implementing a next-gen hardware scheduler alongside Alder Lake, so that should definitely help with the transition. Now, on the other hand, Apple has been working with big little ARM technology for years already. In fact, the A10 Fusion chip from the iPhone 7 was the first Apple chip to use this technology, and that was almost 5 years ago, so they have a ton of experience with it. Not only that, but Apple has a very unique advantage that almost nobody out there has. They control the software, the hardware, and the chip itself all at the same time, and that's why M1 Max works so well. If you remember a couple of years ago when Apple dropped 32-bit app support on the Mac, or when they dropped NVIDIA graphics because they refused to support Apple's Metal API, all of those changes were actually part of Apple transitioning their software years in advance to get ready for the M1 Max. And obviously, Intel doesn't have that advantage because the only thing they control is the chip. On top of that, Apple has been buying out all or most of the yields for the best chips in the business from TSMC. So with all of that together, it's going to be extremely hard for Intel to catch up. And if you look even further into the future, if ARM chips end up outperforming x86 chips on every level, Intel will be even more behind, since these new Alder Lake chips are still using x86. Both Samsung and Qualcomm have already been making ARM-based chips for years, so I suspect many Windows laptop makers will simply go with them instead if they want to maximize battery life and performance. And even AMD is much closer than Intel, since they already create ARM-based chips like the Opteron A1100 for servers. And according to recent leaks and rumors, AMD is already working on an ARM-based SoC similar to Apple's M1 chip. There was even AMD's Project Skybridge from a few years back, which intended to pack both x86 cores and ARM cores on the same chip, being the perfect hybrid transitionary chip. So I wonder if AMD is gonna work on that. But either way, based on everything that I discussed in this video, there are a lot of hurdles that Intel is gonna have to pass through. And if they end up delaying Alder Lake into 2022, they could end up way too far behind. So there you guys go. Let me know what you guys think about Alder Lake and the whole Intel versus Apple thing down in the comments below. Be sure to check out one of those two videos right there. Click the circle above to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.